Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your source material and really help you cut through the noise to find the most valuable insights.
We act as your guides, basically, through the information you've shared, helping you uncover what's truly important and often, well, surprising.
And today, we're plunging into a really fascinating stack you sent over. There's a small but insightful note here on customer reviews, and then our main focus. Powerful excerpts from the book Around the World in Leadership, A Cultural Perspective
Yeah.
by Albert Hilaire and Ibon Momo.
Yeah, this book draws on some really deep global experience, doesn't it? It explores one of the most critical challenges today, leading effectively when your team, your customers, or, your partners are spread across different cultures.
Right. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the core ideas around navigating these global teams, understanding diverse leadership styles, and crucially, how empathy bridges those cultural divides. That note on customer reviews. It struck me how even something seemingly simple like a star rating, it's built on a complex system. Algorithms analyzing recency, verification, weighting factors. It's not just a simple average, is it? It's analyzed to verify trustworthiness.
That's a perfect way to look at it, actually, because just like verifying a review's trustworthiness is more complex than just seeing the stars, cultural interactions are far more layered than they first appear. Leadership especially gets incredibly complicated when you cross borders, and approaches that work perfectly fine in one place can, well, fail spectacularly in another.
So these sources are really relevant right now.
Incredibly relevant. Because in today's world, pretty much everyone is leading in some kind of global context, whether they realize it or not.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The book immediately lands a crucial point about why understanding culture isn't just, optional anymore. It's non-negotiable for leaders.
It really does. It opens with a very compelling anecdote from Jakarta. The author describes preparing meticulously for this pitch to a senior government official armed with perfect data, polished slides, robust projections. Everything felt technically spot on.
But it didn't work.
It just didn't land. He got polite nods, promises to consider, and ultimately zero progress.
So what went wrong? What did he miss?
Well, he realized later it was the cultural context of the interaction. He dove straight into the business problem, the solution, completely overlooking the importance of first establishing a genuine personal connection.
Ah, right. So his efficiency-focused approach, which probably works great back home.
Exactly. It might have been perceived as a lack of respect, maybe, for the relationship building process, or even just impatience with the hierarchy there.
So he had the technical smarts but missed the cultural piece.
Precisely. He had the right technical intelligence, but basically zero cultural intelligence in that moment. And that became the profound lesson. Data, strategy, even sheer brilliance aren't enough globally if you don't understand the human element and how it operates in that specific context. What's needed is cultural intelligence CQ.
Okay, cultural intelligence. So
Yeah.
how does the source actually define this capability? Is it just being aware?
Great question. No, it's defined as the capability to relate and work effectively across cultures. The book makes it really clear. It's more than just awareness that other cultures exist. And it's definitely more than just sensitivity to differences. It's presented as a measurable, developable skill, much like, say, emotional intelligence.
Okay, a developable skill.
Right.
And the source introduces a framework here.
Mm.
David Livermore's 4 capabilities of CQ.
Right. Think of them as the components you need to build up. There's CQ drive, that's your personal motivation, your sort of curiosity and confidence to actually engage with other cultures.
Okay.
Then CQ knowledge, simply put, understanding cultural similarities and differences, knowing that the rules of the game might vary significantly.
Makes sense.
And CQ strategy, this is your ability to make sense of what's happening in a cross-cultural situation, like being a cultural detective and planning how to approach it. And finally, CQ action, the really crucial piece, your skill in actually adapting your behavior across cultures, knowing when and how to adjust. It's the difference between, reading the map and actually navigating the tricky terrain.
Which matters more than ever today, right?
Yeah.
Our teams aren't just global, they're diverse, often distributed. And the cost of low CQ sounds huge misunderstandings kill performance.
Absolutely.
Like you mentioned, think about feedback. Indirect feedback valued in Japan being completely misinterpreted as agreement by someone from, say, the US, where directness is the norm.
Exactly. And on the flip side, high CQ builds bridges. When leaders understand and respect different cultural norms, people feel seen, psychological safety increases, and collaboration just thrives. Innovation needs diverse perspectives, sure, but they have to be led inclusively to really translate into new ideas.
And the source doesn't shy away from the consequences of lacking CQ, does it? It gives some pretty stark examples.
No, it doesn't pull punches. It mentions Western flat structures failing in hierarchical Asian settings because they didn't respect the existing social order. Or, an NGO bypassing local leaders in Africa because they didn't grasp the community power structures leading to project failure.
Right, or that U.S. firm losing a client in the Middle East because their marketing was just culturally tone-deaf.
In every single case, it led to lost trust, wasted time, damaged relationships. It really brings up an important question for you, the listener. How aware are you of your own cultural conditioning? What assumptions might you be making based on your background that could be invisible blind spots when you're interacting globally? That kind of cultural humility is absolutely key to starting this journey.
Okay, so if CQ is a skill, how does the book suggest we actually build this muscle? It's not just about reading books, presumably.
No, it emphasizes intentionality. Expose yourself to diverse perspectives through travel, sure, but also reading global media, listening to international podcasts, genuinely engaging with colleagues from different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Crucially, ask before you assume. Instead of interpreting behavior only through your own lens, ask about the why behind it. Seek feedback, actively ask people in other cultures about your leadership style.
That takes courage.
It does. And practice CQ action. Consciously try adapting your behavior in small ways, ways that feel authentic to you, but also respectful of the other culture.
That makes sense. It's about being a perpetual learner, isn't it? A cultural bridge builder.
Yeah.
Okay, building on this foundation of why CQ matters, the book takes us into the fascinating landscape of leadership styles themselves. And it opens with another vivid anecdote, this time from Nairobi.
Yes, the story about the unexpected CEO. The author is at this leadership retreat, listening to executives from Europe and North America introduce themselves, confidently listing their titles, accomplishments, responsibilities, standard stuff.
Right.
Then a Kenyan man is introduced. When asked to share, he just simply says, I help coordinate a few things.
Which in many cultures would sound incredibly modest almost. Insignificant.
Exactly. But the author soon realized this man was the CEO of a highly successful regional company, widely respected, deeply influential. His impact wasn't derived from a flashy title or, outward displays of power.
That's wrong.
From deep, genuine relationships, quiet wisdom, and profound humility. He led with presence and strength, not just status.
Wow. That story immediately lands the insight. Leadership isn't this single universal concept. What works and what's expected of a leader is deeply cultural.
It introduces the idea of leadership archetypes, these culturally embedded patterns and expectations that shape how people view and respond to leaders. The book mentions frameworks like Hofstede, Gilo, B. Trompenaars as tools, not rigid boxes, to help us decode these patterns.
And it breaks down Hofstede's 6 dimensions really nicely, linking them directly to leadership. Let's take power distance. The core insight here seems to be that how people expect leaders to act isn't just about personality.
No, it's hardwired into their culture's view of hierarchy. If you walk into a meeting in a high-power distance culture, say Malaysia, assuming everyone wants a casual, flat discussion like you might find in Denmark,
You're missing the mark.
completely, you're missing the fundamental expectation of respect for authority they're looking for.
Okay, what about individualism versus collectivism?
Big one. In individualistic cultures like the U.S., leaders might be expected to be bold, maybe self-promoting individuals. In collectivist cultures like China, leaders are often seen more as stewards of the group, prioritizing harmony and collective well-being.
In uncertainty avoidance, how does that play out?
Well, it impacts how leaders handle ambiguity. Cultures high in it, like Japan, might prefer leaders who provide structure, clear processes, whereas lower cultures, like Singapore perhaps, might be more comfortable with leaders who embrace risk and improvisation.
Then there's assertiveness versus modesty, like Germany versus Thailand.
Right. In Germany, direct, assertive leaders are often admired for their clarity. In Thailand, a more modest, indirect approach might be seen as more respectful and influential.
Performance orientation. Results versus relationships.
Yeah, think Singapore valuing results and achievement leaders expected to be driven, competitive, versus maybe Venezuela, where relationships and human connection might be prioritized more highly in leadership.
And finally, humane orientation.
Right, where cultures like the Philippines or much of Africa place really high value on leaders who are caring, compassionate, and generous.
Understanding these dimensions helps explain those patterns, like the 5 common global archetypes the book mentions: commander, collaborator.
Visionary, guardian, and strategist,
Yeah.
and where they tend to be more common, but it reinforces that these are patterns, not stereotypes.
Right, absolutely crucial. Not every leader from a country fits neatly. For example, you mentioned East Asia, influenced by harmony. What looks like silence to a Western leader might be something else entirely.
Exactly, like in that Tokyo anecdote. It could be a thoughtful pause, considering the group's perspective before speaking, avoiding disruption.
So this process of decoding leadership styles,
Yeah.
it really forces you to ask, doesn't it? How does my own cultural background unconsciously shape my definition of a good leader?
That's step one to cultural agility, recognizing your own lens.
And the actionable principles here seem to be about adapting consciously, not just imitating.
Definitely. Adapt, don't imitate, flex your own approach. Clarify expectations early because what people want from a leader differs culturally. Balance local norms with global consistency where you can. Observe first, always observe first, and ultimately build a toolbox of different styles you can consciously deploy.
The goal is to become, as the book puts it, a leader of many worlds.
Precise.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, but building on this. The next foundational piece the source emphasizes is empathy, calls it a universal leadership currency. And the anecdote here is the silence in soul.
Right. The author describes this workshop. Western managers are quick to jump in, ideas flying, opinions shared. Meanwhile, the Korean managers, largely silent, listening intently.
And the Western reaction.
One Western manager gets frustrated, whispers, "Why won't they speak up? Are they disengaged?" Typical low-context interpretation, right?
But that wasn't it at all.
No. Later, a Korean colleague explains that in their culture, that silence is a form of engagement and respect. It's taking time to process deeply, consider others' input, formulate a thoughtful response that doesn't disrupt harmony. Speaking too quickly can seem careless, even arrogant.
Wow. So what looked like disinterest was actually respect.
Exactly. The bridge across that massive gap wasn't more data or a stronger argument, it was empathy. The willingness and ability to step outside your own cultural framework and try to understand the meaning behind another person's behavior from their perspective.
So empathy here isn't just being nice, it's strategic. And the source breaks it down into 3 types.
It does, very helpfully. Cognitive empathy, I understand how you think. Emotional empathy, I feel what you feel. And behavioral empathy, I adjust how I act based on that understanding. Effective global leaders, the book argues, work to master all 3.
And critically, the way empathy is shown varies hugely, right?
Absolutely. While the capacity for empathy might be universal, how it's expressed is totally cultural. East Asians might show it through deep, respectful listening, nonverbal cues. Latin Americans might express it through physical warmth, expressive language. Scandinavians, perhaps through quiet, practical support. A global leader learns to decode these different expressions.
And why does empathy work so well in global teams? What does the source say?
Well, it builds psychological safety. People feel safe to be themselves, right?
Yeah.
It bridges communication gaps by helping you interpret why someone's communicating in a certain way. It diffuses conflict by getting past misread intentions, thinking they weren't being difficult, they were prioritizing face saving.
Okay.
It enhances inclusion, and it enables adaptability because you can better understand what others actually need.
So actionable principles for being more empathetic as a leader.
Listen beyond the words, consciously. Especially in high-context cultures where meaning is embedded in silence, tone, body language, always ask before assuming you know the cultural reason for something.
Don't jump to conclusions.
Exactly. Practice mirroring cultural preferences respectfully, maybe starting a meeting with small talk if that's the norm, even if it feels inefficient to you. And practice cultural humility, be willing to admit when you've misinterpreted something and ask for guidance.
This really highlights a key question for you, the listener. When you encounter behavior that feels off or frustrating in a cross-cultural setting, is your first emotional reflex frustration, or is it curiosity? Leading with empathy starts right there, with that self-awareness.
And the source argues it doesn't make you soft, it actually makes you powerful because it allows you to truly connect with and leverage diversity.
Okay. From these foundational concepts, CQ, leadership styles, empathy, the book moves into lessons from the field, giving us deeper dives into specific regions, starting with Africa, where the core insight is community first, ego last.
Yeah, and the Senegal meeting anecdote illustrates this perfectly. The author arrives for a business meeting, laptop open, ready to dive into the agenda. But the host began with extensive personal conversation, asking about his family, his journey, sharing stories over tea for nearly 30 minutes before business was even mentioned.
Which would drive some Western managers crazy, probably.
He initially felt impatient, wanting to get to the task, but his local partner later explained, "In our culture, we never start a meeting without first truly seeing each other." The human connection isn't just preamble, it's the absolute foundation upon which business trust is built. What looked like inefficiency was essential relationship building.
And this ties into the philosophy of Ubuntu, I am because we are.
Exactly. It's more than just a saying. It's like the operating system for leadership there. Leadership isn't seen as power over others, but as responsibility for the well-being and harmony of the group.
So key traits in African leadership would be
A strong emphasis on collectivism, relational leaders who build deep personal bonds, respect for elders and consensus building, and leadership focused on responsibility for the community rather than, personal recognition or glory.
okay, so actionable advice for leading in or with teams from this context.
Invest heavily in relationships first. Earn respect not just through competence, but through service and humility. Decentralized decisions where possible, involve community representatives. Adapt your communication. Private feedback is often preferred over public critique. Celebrate group achievements. And remember, what looks like slowness is often intentional foundational work. Don't rush it.
The takeaway from African leadership seems really powerful for everyone, actually. A reminder that leadership can be stewardship, focused on nurturing people and community.
Yeah, proving that influence thrives when it genuinely unites. It's leading with humility and service.
Okay, heading east now. The source explores East Asia, highlighting precision and harmony. That Tokyo silence anecdote comes back here.
Right, emphasizing that profound stillness after a direct question. The Japanese colleague's explanation highlights the underlying value. Taking a moment not just to formulate their own answer, but to consider how it impacts the group dynamic, striving for harmony, avoiding disruption. Speaking too soon can seem inconsiderate.
And leadership here is deeply influenced by Confucian values. Social order, hierarchy, harmony.
Definitely. Key traits include hierarchy navigated with humility, group decision-making processes like Japan's Ring Aikido, a strong reliance on nonverbal cues to maintain face and convey subtle meaning, and significant importance placed on face or reputation, Mianzi in China, Kibun in Korea, and Japan.
So, for leading effectively here, what are the actionable principles?
Lead through consensus building. Prioritize the team's success over any individual star performance. Respect the pace. Understand that thoughtful deliberation isn't delay, it's part of the process. Learn to master subtlety. Silence can mean many things: processing, polite disagreement, contemplation.
Not just confusion.
Not at all. And honor hierarchy gently. Show respect without being overly rigid. Pitfalls include misinterpreting silence, seeing indirectness as dishonesty. A wise leader learns to slow down to truly understand the context, which, ironically, often speeds things up in the long run.
Right. Okay, crossing the Atlantic now, we look at North America and Europe, a region characterized by directness versus diplomacy, but with lots of variation within it, yeah. The Berlin anecdote seems key here.
It really is. The author presented his data, his timelines. A German colleague responded very directly. Your data on market entry timing is off by at least a year. Your calculations are flawed. Boom. No preamble, just a stark, fact-based assessment publicly.
Which might feel blunt, maybe even rude in many other cultures.
But in that context, it's often seen as a form of intellectual honesty. Respect for clarity, for accuracy. The message is almost, I respect you enough to give you the unvarnished truth so we can succeed. Clarity is a leadership virtue.
So, Western styles generally prize direct communication, individual initiative, lower power distance.
Generally, yeah. And a strong focus on results. But as the book notes, there are significant variations: German precision, French formality and debate, Nordic consensus seeking, and egalitarianism. It's not monolithic.
And key leadership traits often found here.
Leading from the front is common, particularly North America. Emphasis on structure, logic, process in Western Europe, accessibility, decisiveness, and that strong focus on achieving clear, measurable results.
Actionable advice then.
Be clear, be concise, respect and encourage individual initiative. Be prepared to give and receive direct, constructive feedback, it's often expected, and understand that challenging a leader's idea can actually be a sign of engagement, not disrespect.
But the source suggests Western leaders are also evolving, blending directness with more empathy.
Yes, learning to temper that valued directness with greater cultural empathy and situational awareness. The inherent strength is authenticity, clarity, courage, but balancing it with context sensitivity is key.
Okay, moving south again. The deep dive covers the Middle East and South Asia, where the focus shifts to navigating hierarchies. The New Delhi anecdote really captures this, doesn't it?
It does. The author asked a middle manager for his direct opinion on a plan during a meeting, expected immediate feedback, right.
Yeah.
But the response was polite, deferred. I will certainly speak with my supervisor and relay your question. We will then get back to you with a consolidated response.
So it wasn't a lack of insight, it was about respecting the hierarchy.
Exactly. Deference to authority is foundational in many of these cultures, not optional. Leadership is deeply shaped by high-power distance, that significant perceived gap between leader and subordinate, combined with collectivism, relationship-based trust, and often a preference for indirect communication to maintain harmony and faith.
And leaders are seen differently, like directors or protectors, mentors.
Often, yes. Directors and protectors in the Middle East, perhaps mentors and benevolent father figures in South Asia. Loyalty from the team is often earned by the leader's generosity, fairness, and protection.
So actionable principles for leading effectively in these contexts.
Acknowledge and respect the hierarchy. Don't try to bypass it or force Western-style flatness where it doesn't fit. Invest in relationships before you push for tasks or results. Trust is often built relationally first. Communicate with tact and diplomacy, avoiding direct public criticism which causes loss of face. Understand the crucial role of the group, and be patient with decision-making processes that involve consultation.
Pitfalls seem obvious, then assuming silence means agreement, pushing too hard for individual opinions.
Or being too casual in status-sensitive environments. Leading effectively here requires deep cultural humility and patience. Seriously.
Okay, final stop on our regional tour. Latin America, characterized by flexibility and warmth. The São Paulo anecdote sounds familiar.
It is, in a way. The author arrives for a scheduled meeting, agenda ready, clock ticking, but it starts late, begins not with business, but with extended conversation over coffee families, friends, weekend plans, laughter.
That Western impatience kicking in again.
He felt it, but consciously held back, observed. A project manager later explained, "Here, we work with people we trust, and we don't trust people we don't know." That time spent on personal connection wasn't a delay. It was the essential, non-negotiable work of building the trust foundation needed for any future collaboration.
So Latin American leadership emphasizes warmth, empathy, and this concept of personalismo.
Exactly. The importance of building close personal relationships. There's also adaptability and improvisation valued here, and often a charismatic leadership style. Hierarchy exists, sure, but it's often balanced by a human touch, interpersonal closeness.
Key traits, then, are
Charismatic leaders, building strong personal bonds, hierarchy that allows for human connection, and flexibility seen as a positive trait, not a lack of structure.
so actionable principles.
Always start by investing in people, not just projects. Lead with warmth and relationship building, then follow with structure and task focus. Be comfortable with a degree of ambiguity and improvisation. It's often part of the process. Honor hierarchy, but remain open and accessible to input. And communicate not just clearly, but also emotionally and expressively.
And the pitfalls. Being too transactional,
Yeah.
too rigid.
Exactly. Overly transactional, strictly adhering to rigid schedules, ignoring the importance of that personal connection. Leadership here is deeply a human endeavor, often leading with the heart.
Wow. Those regional deep dives really to life how differently leadership can look and feel. But, okay, how do you actually apply all that understanding? How do you build trust when trust itself means different things? How do you communicate and handle conflict across these diverse landscapes? The final part of the book dives into these practical skills for bridging those gaps, starting with trust.
Yeah, and the Legos in New York anecdote here is excellent. It contrasts American engineers, often valuing cognitive trust based on competence, reliability, track record, can you do the job? Right.
With their Nigerian counterparts, who emphasized effective trust, built on relationships, emotional bonds, personal connection, Who are you as a person? Can I relate to you?
So the core insight is that trust isn't universal. It has different architectures, different priorities. Cognitive trust versus affective trust.
Exactly. Cognitive trust might be critical in places like the US or Germany. Effective trust is absolutely vital in many parts of Latin America, Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Effective global leaders understand which type of trust is primary in a given context and build accordingly. It's not either-or, but the emphasis shifts.
And the book highlights pillars for trust: competence, character, connection.
Right. Actual steps include understanding their language of trust, being willing to slow down to speed up in relationship-based cultures,
Yeah.
leading with integrity universally, of course, but adapting how you build that connection. Sometimes, using a trusted intermediary or local partner can be a vital trust bridge.
So leveraging your cultural intelligence to build trust that actually resonates locally. Makes sense.
It's your superpower, really. Okay, next, communicating across borders. This ties back to those Seoul and Denver examples we talked about.
Yeah, this brings in the concept of high versus low context communication, which is absolutely fundamental for anyone working globally. Low context cultures, common in the US or Germany, are like, all right, everything's written in bold, explicit sentences. Meaning is primarily in the words themselves.
Very direct.
Very direct. High context cultures, Japan, the Middle East, many African countries are more like interpreting poetry. Meaning is deeply embedded in the context, the relationship, the tone, body language, what isn't being said.
And misunderstandings are inevitable when these clash.
Rampant. A low-context leader hears indirectness and thinks evasive or unclear. A high-context team member hears bluntness and feels rude or disrespectful.
So the actionable advice is,
Consciously adapt your style. Be more explicit in low-context settings. Learn to listen beyond the words. Pay attention to nonverbals in high-context settings. Balance directness with diplomacy. Clarify, thoughtfully ask open-ended questions to ensure mutual understanding without putting someone on the spot. Becoming context savvy is like learning the true universal language of global collaboration.
okay. And finally, in this practical skills section, managing conflict and collaboration globally. The Accra anecdote provides a sharp example here.
Very sharp. A situation where a very direct German consultant clashed with a Ghanaian project coordinator over a missed deadline. The German, valuing clarity and accountability, gave direct critical feedback in a public setting.
Oh dear.
Yeah. The Ghanaian, valuing face-saving and group harmony, felt deeply disrespected, humiliated by the public critique. Saw it as an attack on his standing and the team's cohesion, not just feedback on a task.
So conflict is universal, but how it's handled is deeply cultural. Shaped by whether a culture is confrontational or avoidant, individualistic or collectivistic, power distance.
All of those. Common triggers include that direct feedback versus face-saving issue, or prioritizing speed and task completion versus prioritizing consensus and relationships. Collaboration works best when leaders actively respect diverse communication and conflict styles, establish shared norms for interaction, and create psychologically safe spaces for disagreement.
Actionable principles for navigating conflict.
Recognize your own default conflict style and its cultural roots. That's huge. Contextualize the conflict before reacting. Ask, could a different cultural lens explain this behavior? Proactively create a conflict-resilient team culture by actually discussing how you'll handle disagreements together. Practice cultural empathy in the moment. And consider using a third culture approach, where the team co-creates unique norms, blending elements from different backgrounds, rather than just defaulting to one dominant style.
The crucial mindset shift seems to be reframing it, right? Instead of, why is this person being difficult?
Through what cultural lens are they approaching this situation? Exactly. This reframes conflict from a threat to a potential path towards deeper understanding and stronger collaboration.
This whole journey through CQ, styles, empathy, regions, and skills, it naturally leads us to look at the future of leadership itself. And the source starts this final section with a really simple but powerful moment in a classroom in Cape Town.
Yeah, the author asked a group of high schoolers what kind of leaders they admired. Amidst the usual answers, politicians, entrepreneurs, a quiet 16-year-old girl just says, I admire someone who listens to people who doesn't speak loudly.
Wow. That single observation challenges so much conventional leadership training, which often focuses on assertiveness, charisma, being the loudest voice in the room.
Right. The source argues leadership development must change because current models are often too rooted in Western individualistic ideals. They just don't cut it globally anymore.
So future global leaders need more.
They need genuine cultural intelligence, a truly global mindset, empathic communication, ethical adaptability across different value systems, and collaborative humility. It's not enough to just manage differences. We need to honor them and learn from them. Training needs to build deep cultural self-awareness and include real-world exposure, not just theory.
And this is where the concept of hybrid leadership emerges, introduced with that Paris Roundtable anecdote.
Exactly. Imagine that group. A Nigerian founder driven by community purpose, a French engineer focused on intellectual rigor, a Singaporean investor known for quiet diplomacy. They weren't trying to imitate each other's styles. They were blending their deeply ingrained cultural approaches organically, creating something new and effective for that situation.
So hybrid leadership is blending multiple cultural traits and styles flexibly.
Into a flexible, inclusive model that's co-created, not just imitated. It's emerging because our world demands it. Globalization, digital collaboration, generational shifts, the sheer complexity of global crises, all require leaders who are adaptable and can draw on a wider range of approaches.
And the core traits of these hybrid leaders are
Cultural agility, fluidly moving between styles. Identity integration, blending their own heritage with new global perspectives. Empathic adaptation, adjusting behavior respectfully based on cultural cues. And situational intelligence, knowing what approach is needed right here, right now, with these specific people.
The source gives examples, like a manager adapting to a South Asian team's hierarchy, but using humility. Or a UAE founder blending Silicon Valley speed with Gulf hospitality.
Yeah, exactly. Hybridity requires unlearning old reflexes and consciously expanding your leadership repertoire. It's active work.
So how do you develop this? It sounds complex.
Map your own biases. Actively learn about different leadership languages and approaches, exposure, study. Observe others without judgment, try to understand the why. Experiment with different approaches in low-stakes situations. And always, always anchor your adaptability in your core values, ensuring your flexibility feels authentic, not just performative or like you're appropriating something.
That authenticity piece is key. And this leads beautifully to the final overarching theme, leading with humanity. The Kinshasa anecdote really captures this essence, doesn't it?
It really does. The author was having a tough, tense day in a meeting, frustrated, overwhelmed. An elder on the team sensed his struggle, calmly paused the agenda, and said, with just profound sincerity, "You are our guest, but also our brother. Let us solve this together."
Wow, that must have changed everything.
Instantly dissolved the tension. It wasn't about the technical problem anymore. It was about shared humanity, collective responsibility. Leadership, at its most fundamental level, isn't command or control. It's genuine connection.
And the book talks about the paradox of our global village. Technology connects us, but
it doesn't automatically bridge gaps in meaning, trust, or understanding caused by those cultural blind spots. Leadership in this world needs an inclusive, curious, deeply human-centered mindset. It requires actively seeking out difference and seeing it not as a challenge, but as a source of strength, of richness.
So recapping this incredible journey through the sources, we've seen the non-negotiable need for cultural intelligence, explored the diversity of leadership archetypes, recognized empathy as a universal but culturally expressed currency.
Delved into practical skills like building trust, communicating, managing conflict across borders, and looked at the emerging need for these hybrid, adaptable leaders.
The ultimate lesson from these sources seems to be about your role, the listener's role, how you choose to navigate differences, whether you lead globally or just in a diverse local team. That fundamentally determines the leader you become and the legacy you leave.
Absolutely.
Leading with humanity means prioritizing the dignity of each person, seeing people in their full cultural context, actively working for inclusion, making space for multiple perspectives, multiple truths, and consistently choosing empathy, even when it's hard.
And it's not a soft option. The source argues it's the strongest, most transformative path forward.
The road ahead needs leaders who are culturally fluent, emotionally intelligent, genuinely adaptable.
These are the leaders who will build the trust technology can't replace, inspire the loyalty algorithms can't engineer, and create the unity that transcends borders. They become the bridge.
So as you move forward from this deep dive, interacting with others across different backgrounds and perspectives, ask yourself this final provocative question based on everything we've discussed. In our hyper-connected, complex world, are you consciously listening for the silence and truly valuing the connection that builds the deepest, most enduring trust?
Thank you for joining this deep dive.